I didn't know that Canada's TB spend is down. Other countries is as well. I mean, the Global Fund is the principal external or international partner for tuberculosis funding. A lot of tuberculosis funding is done by the countries themselves. And our role is more catalytic or trying to move directions of programs. But in sub-Saharan Africa, we are the largest funder there. So one thing that might be valuable is to point out that if you have to go down in your domestic, and Canada's been great on TB. They're the biggest supporter of Stop TB. They're doing really creative stuff with reach, which is what we talked about, getting into the community and reaching people that otherwise have not been reached before, in marginalized and vulnerable groups. And we're developing a regional program around mines in sub-Saharan Africa, and Canada, CETA's been a very important partner in that and leader in that. So TB's been a real strength of CETA and Canada. So the Global Fund could be a vehicle by which they could actually expand TB resourcing if they're not able to through bilateral means. But TB's we don't talk enough about TB and the challenge of TB, which is, in sub-Saharan Africa is closely linked to HIV, but that's not the case in Eastern Europe and in parts of Southeast Asia and Latin America. And the risk of MDR-TB is extraordinary. And really Eastern Europe is the biggest challenge there, although sub-Saharan Africa is a challenge as well, and parts of Asia. So we take very seriously our role as the largest external funder. There's been a lot of confusion around the new funding model. We actually went up to 18% overall for tuberculosis funding. There's $2 billion in the pipeline, which needs to be put to use. That can only be used if countries come forward with good plans. And so it's very important for people who are interested in TB to work with the countries to come up with the plans. Malaria has done this extremely effectively through a harmonization working group, working with countries where money was on the table to support them so that they could come forward with the good plans that were going to have a big impact. And I think it's very important that the TB community do that, because that $2 billion could be left on the table if countries don't come forward with good plans.
You were mentioning MDR-TB and just really trying to get a sense of what the strategy and the plan that the Global Fund has in addressing MDR-TB. I'm going to give a little plug for my CETA colleague here, but TB Reach has been really great in terms of the procurement and distribution of Gene Expert, which is a new rapid diagnostic in the area of TB that's able to test and detect MDR-TB in patients in 2 hours. I mean, it's revolutionary in the TB world. I get really excited about diagnostics, so I'm sorry about that. But just TB, particularly related to TB. But if you could elaborate a little bit more, I know that Global Fund has been has taken a huge leadership role in terms of TB and mining in South Africa, and that's a huge role that we appreciate as advocates that you've been playing. So just wondering what sort of strategies and plans the Global Fund has around addressing MDR-TB.
So again, our strategy and plan is not ours. It's countries and partners and the technical partners in particular, bilaterals, multilaterals, and implementers and advocates such as implementers and advocates like Results and others around this table. But I think in general the global strategy is different than some of the other diseases because a lot of it is political. Eastern Europe, it's strictly a political problem. India is largely a political problem. It's not a resource problem. It's a political problem. And so, for example, Margaret Chan and I are going to Eastern Europe together to work with Ukraine and other countries that are interested in moving but aren't quite getting there on some of the changes that are necessary around, and as you know, MDR-TB is a problem of TB. It's not we get to MDR-TB because we're not identifying and keeping people in services. Institutionalization is still far too common in Eastern Europe, and it's not an effective approach, and we know this. So it's really a shift, a political shift. And then there's the resource shift and the programmatic shift. So one of the things, for example, in renewals we're really pushing is the integration between TB and HIV and HIV and TB. And we'll be doing that in the new funding model because in sub-Saharan Africa they have to be linked. They have to basically be the same program area. And we see in grants sometimes or renewal applications where they're not actually drawing those links and what's being done in country isn't sufficient. And then for MDR-TB, it's we are by far the largest supporter gene expert in the world, but it has to be put in the right places. Too often it winds up in the central hospital. South Africa, as you know, is doing a great job. The minister is putting, I think, 1,800 of them in prisons around or a couple hundred of them in prisons around the country, which is where they need to be. And then the mines will be a huge area in sub-Saharan Africa as well. So, but the approach is really to work with partners across from development to implementation to politics, and how those three, and it's different everywhere. I mean, one of the problems with all of these diseases, we tended to look at global pictures or even regional pictures or even country pictures, which are just, it's too blunt of an instrument. We really need to be much more focused and much more specific.